Welcome to AIM's podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at a very interesting topic, which is dear to everyone's heart. You all are hearing AI is taking our jobs. Well, today, we're going to look at this fascinating topic about workplace culture, workplace burnout, the expectations that people have of the workplace and AI. And it's going to be based around a very important study which came out recently, a Gallup research of global workforce practices. And with me is a special guest, Kimberley Matalon. Welcome to AI in plain English, where we explain AI without the hype and without the consultant jargon. So let's dive into it. Welcome, Kimberley Matalon. How are you feeling today, Kimberley?
Rob, so excited to be here. I love this topic. I think it's the right time to be talking about it, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we go with it.
Absolutely. So just before we get into the topic, just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and how it is that you now are in the AI industry.
So I am an executive and team coach, and I really have a focus on leadership development and organizational cultures. If I look at my career, how I got here is not necessarily a straight path. It's actually quite squirrely with a lot of pivots. So I started with a degree in finance and naturally started in a very small entrepreneurial company, and did everything there, had loads of fun and took a lot of learnings. But I felt very quickly I needed to go back and be really structured in my learning. So I did an MBA and made my first shift into management consulting. And Rob, that was fabulous because what I saw was senior leaders facing their most difficult, critical, strategic problems. And I got access to how they were thinking and what they were thinking. But it's there that I figured out, or that I saw, that you can have the best strategy ever, but if you don't have great leaders and you don't have the right culture, it will not work. And so I made my second pivot into banking, right? Where I could implement some of the things that I saw in real life. And that's where I learned all about change and change management, because we think about what we went through in the banking industry between the financial crisis, between digitalization and everything moving very, very rapidly. And then for us, a lot of changing in CEOs. I got the ability to really help leaders and their teams manage through what was constant change. And that made me ready to do what I do today, which is help organizations find how to work, develop their leaders and their culture in the way that's going to make them successful in the future, regardless of what transformation comes.
Right. And we know that AI is one of the biggest transformations that the world has seen. And it goes beyond electricity, or the trains, or the planes. And it's permeating into every aspect of not just personal life, but work life. So today we want to kind of decompose, dissect this report, this 2026 State of the Global Workplace report by Gallup, and find out what it is really telling us and how that is going to impact how organizations can manage that talent as AI is introduced into the workforce. So just for folks who don't know about this report, Kim, can you just give us a brief overview of what's in it?
Yes. So with your permission and hopefully with the permission of our audience, because I am going through the Gallup report and I want to make sure that I get the numbers right, the data right, I'm just going to have some papers in front of me. So Gallup is probably one of the world recognized research and analytics houses. And what it does is it has this fabulous database, right, of over 160 countries and going back 20 odd years. And it brings this database, and we use it because it allows us to benchmark where we are with things like workforce culture and engagement. And what the report said, it says a lot of things about, a lot of countries. But if I think about the three things that I think are really important for where we are in terms of this transition and this AI disruption, three things jump out at me. So the first is that engagement as an overall score is going down globally, right? So 20% of the workforce currently says that they are actively engaged. That's globally.
And
right?
what do we mean by engaged?
What we mean there is that these are the people that really care about what's happening in the workforce around them, in their organization. And not only do they care, but they're thinking like owners, right? And they're trying to make it better and innovating and moving the whole organization and their teams and their people forward, right? So they are actively engaged. But if you think about that, that means 80% of the company is not engaged, right? And that could either be they're quietly quitting or they're actively, right, potentially even working against the company.
It's really serious when you think about it, because, and when we talk about company here, we're just talking about organizations, not necessarily just corporations, because whether you're in the private sector or the public sector and you're working, what we want individuals to do is that active engagement is quite important, because for leaders, if you have a workforce that's not actively engaged, not owning that strategic journey and not feeling that they're part of the strategic journey of the organization, then when you start doing big transformations like we're seeing in this age of AI, where you need to bring your people along with you, then you're going to encounter a problem. Absolutely. Adoption is going to be that much more difficult. Absolutely. So what are the other insights that you gathered from this report?
Which actually takes up on that point that you've just said. Although the workforce itself is disengaged or more likely to be disengaged, the sharpest disengagement rates are happening in the managerial level, right?
Wow.
And what does this mean? If you think about where managers sit between leaders and the employees, right? And they're the ones that are making the day-to-day decisions that really make a difference to their people, right? And if these managers are disengaged and burnt out, just think about the multiplier effect, right, of having disengaged staff. And in fact, the Gallup report actually talks about that last year alone, there was $10 trillion lost to workforce disengagement, lost in productivity.
10 trillion. That's a huge number. That's 10 with 12 zeros behind it. That is huge to think that globally productivity loss is costing organizations so much.
And interestingly, Rob, the other thing that it shows us in Europe, so let's bring it back home. In Europe, we are the lowest, 12 out of 12, in terms of workforce engagement overall, right? As a country, we have the lowest workforce engagement at 12%, right? So that means we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. What are the other insights? What's the third insight that you've gathered from the report?
So the third thing is actually quite interesting, because Gallup makes a difference between engagement and well-being, right? And they look at how people feel about their lives in general. And what they're saying is that globally, 34% of people are thriving, which means that they're generally happy with what's going on. 56% are struggling, which means that they are facing significant strains. And then 9% are suffering, which means their basic needs aren't even being met. Now, that's interesting in and of itself. But actually, when you look at where Europe is quite different. So almost half of the people in Europe are saying that they are thriving. And that's a real conundrum, because when you look at where we said still 20% of their workforce is not engaged. is actively engaged and 80% is disengaged or actively disengaged, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, right? Because what it's saying is that in Europe, people are happy, but they're emotionally disconnected from the work.
From the workplace.
And there's something that we have to do about that.
Right. And that is crucial, because here at AIMS, when we help organizations to do AI adoption, one of the things we work on with organizations is that workplace culture. Mm-hmm. And we know it's quite important that the workforce, our mission is to help leaders uplift the workforce through many strategies that we have. So the fact that this Gallup survey is identifying this level of unhappiness in the workplace means that when you come to AI adoption, you have a bigger challenge.
Yeah. And they also talk about the fact, we talked about the managers being more disengaged than they used to be, and why that's critical, because they point to two things that really make a difference in AI adoption. One is the fact that the AI is additional, right, to what it fits into the systems that they currently have, right? So it's not something that they naturally have to learn and learn harder. So that's one thing, right, that it naturally fits into the current systems. But the second thing is that managers make a difference. So if the AI adoption is being led and role modeled by their managers, people are more likely to uptake it. It's more likely to survive in the organization
as a project.
Right.
This is really interesting, really fascinating, Kim. So we're more digitally connected than ever before. And we've got those younger ones who are entering the workforce. They're digital natives. Mm-hmm. So they bring a level of skills that historically wasn't in the workforce or didn't enter the workforce. Yet, what we're hearing now today from this report is that many workers are feeling emotionally disconnected. And that's not good for AI adoption.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so why are so many people struggling right now?
So when you step back, Rob, and this is probably the place where I sound the most doomsworthy. But if you really sit back and look at what's happening in the world, we're in a set of polycrises, right? So if we look at what's happening on the economic situation and the cost of living increases, right? Not good. The political instability, whether that's the Ukraine war or the recent Iran-US war, there's a lot of tension and anxiety about what's going to happen. Technological disruption and AI acceleration. Climate breakdown, right? Increasing health crises, beyond the pandemic, hantavirus coming up, relatively recently. And all of this is happening where there's less trust in institutions and in governments. And so everything seems to be changing and not necessarily in a way that people feel comfortable and able to handle. So they're overwhelmed. And then on top of that, there's two other things that are happening. The speed is speeding up, right? So we are going through flux faster.
Change is happening at such rapid pace. And AI obviously brings speed that we can't keep up with AI.
Absolutely. And accelerating and amplifying everything.
Yeah.
The second thing is actually information is not the issue now. We actually have a communication, right? Because there's tons of information out there, but it's overwhelming and we don't even know if that we can trust it. So not surprisingly, as the Gallup poll says, 40% of our people feel constantly under stress and anxious.
Wow. And this is really something where people then what one of the things that I got out of the report is they're not just going to work for a paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's not just about pay anymore. Mm-hmm. They want to feel that they have flexibility, they have trust, and more importantly, that they have purpose.
Yes.
So as leaders think about AI adoption, they need to ensure that the purpose is quite clear. There's clarity around the technology adoption and allowing the workforce to move along
and to have a
journey.
voice,
And to have a
have
voice.
a voice in how that's, how that goes.
Yes.
In their organization.
Yeah. We hear this expression, quietly quitting. Are you saying that? Well, do you know what quietly quitting means? Kim, what does quietly quitting mean?
So I referred to it a little while ago, but quietly quitting really means emotional withdrawal, right? It means, and it's not necessarily, we hear the snowflake terminology, and I don't believe in that. What I believe that it's not necessarily a matter of choice, but the workplace itself is not as resilient as it used to be, right? Therefore, a lot of people have to stay where they are. Meanwhile, they're being asked to do more with less all the time, right? And then all of these disruptions are coming. And so it's overwhelming. And sometimes it just feels like all I can do is to do the bare minimum and get myself through the day.
Wow.
Right. And that's what quietly quitting is.
Wow. And that's really interesting for leaders. It's not always about laziness. This is what we're learning from this report. People are not necessarily underperformers per se. Sometimes it's just emotional exhaustion. Yeah. And what we do know about AI is that AI generates so much information, and handling it is exhausting. And so for the managers, for the leaders, to ensure that as workers are starting to engage and work alongside things like agents, they are allowed to have that space to grow in the process and to adapt to the new feel of the speed and the volume of data that they have to handle. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for leaders.
Well, it's a challenge. And also, it's not always obvious who's quietly quitting, right? And what's happening. So managers really need to bring up their human skills, right? About understanding where their people are and how they're feeling and, what their concerns are, as well as manage their own, personal sense of anxiety, etc. So it's a very difficult place for managers to be.
But it's interesting because I'm so excited about AI, as you know, and I don't want us to in any way make this sound as if there's a fear factor that cannot be dismantled, because here at AIMS we're all about removing the fear out of AI adoption. So a quick question: is the workplace becoming harder, or just workers are less resilient? What would you say?
That's a really good question. My sense is that I do think the workplace is becoming harder, right? I think it is more demanding and more structurally exhausting. And as we talked about, the pace of change is just rapidly increasing and people doing more with less. So I do think the workplace is becoming more demanding. But I also think the workforce is changing in that people are becoming less willing, maybe than you and I were, Rob, to accept.
Don't give away our ages, Kim.
To accept the level of stress and demands that they're much more willing to talk about well-being, about work-life balance, about purpose, right? And about and they want to have a voice, right? So I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you have interviews now with entry level roles, or just individuals who have been in the workplace for say 2 or 3 years, that younger cohort of workers, they are asking questions that we didn't ask when we were being interviewed back in the day. Not so far back in the day, we're still 25. But they're asking those questions about what is the organization doing to help people find purpose, or what's the purpose of the organization, and then drilling more into that, and the impact and work they do with communities and so forth. So there's more of a purpose-led employment push now, I would say, than anything else. one thing this report definitely highlights is the pressure on managers.
Yes.
So let's just explore that a little bit. Why are managers struggling so much? And if you're a manager and you're listening to this, are you feeling that pressure? Are you feeling exhausted, burnt out? And what do you think is going to make the difference? Because I can tell you with AI, you are going to be required to stretch those personal skills even further than you're doing now. Kim.
So, Rob, I would be totally surprised if anybody looked at you and said, no, they're not feeling that way, right? Because managers are feeling everything that we've talked about before in terms of the effects of the polycrisis and the overwhelm, right? And the lack of clear, good information. But managers are right in the middle and have to, or are expected to hold it all together, right? For the organization. They are being asked to manage hybrid teams. And what I mean by hybrid teams is it could be remote and on site with their different expectations, but they're also increasingly being asked to manage teams that are made up of human and AI, right? And they're all trying to do all of this without really being helped or taught. Organizations aren't doing enough, right, to help managers along the way. And their leaders can't necessarily always help them because they themselves are also right in this period of overwhelm, etc.
And may not be as digitally savvy
And
as those entry-level workers who now come with this tech skills.
and not being able to be not only digitally savvy, but to acknowledge that, right? We come from a culture where leaders have to know everything, right? And so therefore not knowing makes a lot of very senior leaders uncomfortable, right? So it's all about how do we acknowledge that level of discomfort and have real, honest, open, and transparent conversations.
So there's a level of vulnerability that AI introduces into the leadership, into the management space now, which is not being acknowledged enough. And if it's not acknowledged enough, then we're not going to really make the kind of progress that we need as leaders in order to bring AI adoption into the workforce as frictionlessly as possible. And that's one thing here that at AIMS we're very concerned about, where we've got programs for leaders, for managers, for the C-suite to help them deal with this level of vulnerability.
And lean into it almost.
Lean into it, of course. So that brings us nicely to this question about what are good managers doing? And I'm sure some of you listening, you're good managers. So we also want to hear what you're doing. And Kim, what do you think those good managers are doing?
So there's a laundry list, Rob, but if I was trying to choose, I would say one of the first things is that leaders and managers need to realize that they are the culture carriers, right? Acknowledge and recognize that their role is to build a safe and resilient culture, right? And what does that mean? That means about having psychological safety, right? Where people can talk up without fear of retribution, that they're having open, honest, and grounded conversations, right? Recognizing and leaning into the fear and the vulnerability, both personally and professionally. And to bring, as we said, bring people along in the journey. So that's the first thing, to build that culture of resilience. The second one is to focus on adaptability, not necessarily, expertise. And what I mean by that is because things are changing quite fast, we have to help our people learn how to adapt, how to make changes in direction, how to let things go that maybe you've invested a lot of personal time and effort in, and how to almost embrace that curiosity of learning new things.
And that, I love what you just said there, Kim, because that's one of the areas that we find most difficult when we look at AI adoption, is people letting go of things. So you have leaders, they came up through the rank because they probably introduced a new process, a new division, and they're very passionate about it. However, the passion, while good, needs to be pragmatic. You need to be able to let go of what was relevant yesterday in order to move forward with what is relevant, not just for today, but for the future. And AI drives you into the future. So when it comes to AI adoption, we have to be less passionate about those procedures, those workflows that worked perfectly. To move the organization forward, we need to be able to be humble to realize a difference is required. Yeah. So how now when we talk about AI in the workplace, the future of work, let me hear your views on that.
So I think the future of work is largely exciting, right? But I really do think it depends on how organizations think about AI and implement AI. And, I think on the one hand, AI can be a fabulous thing, right? It can remove repetitive work. It can help people think so much faster and so much quicker than they had before. It can help people find patterns that maybe they would never have recognized, right? And help us all innovate quicker. But on the other hand, as we've said, before, AI can amplify a bad culture, right? So it can increase the fears. And if AI is implemented without the proper ethical guide rails and without the sense of accountability and transparency and explainability, all of those things are incredibly important as we think about why are we using AI, how are we using AI, and how are we bringing our people along in the journey. So I think the one thing, if I could tell people to remember one thing from this entire podcast, it is that AI itself is neither good nor bad. It is the decisions that leaders make and that managers implement and amplify that make it good or bad. So leadership determines the outcome.
Right. Because the reality is, AI is simply going to amplify your current work culture. So if that culture is bad, it just amplifies it. It doesn't make it worse. It just shows up what was already there. If it's good, it's going to drive change in an effective way. So that's something that, our listeners need to recognize. And as we think about the amplification effect, that multiplier effect of AI, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about AI and the workforce? What would you say?
I think the biggest misconceptions that I believe are one of them right now is what you started at the very beginning, right? Which is about this, job apocalypse, right? That AI is going to take away all of our jobs. And the truth of the matter is, and I think you're seeing data in both the US and in Europe, that there have been, some changes, some job losses, in over the past couple of years, but we're not seeing the massive, job losses yet, right? Then that was expected. And I think these changes are really starting because people are implementing AI just for the efficiency. They really haven't got into the idea of using AI and coming from a people first, a human first perspective to fundamentally change the way that organizations do their work, right? And if AI is built in with the people first focus about how are we making humanity better, right? And how is it affecting our people, and what can we do to amplify what, how they're doing and how they're working, it actually can create new jobs, new industries, new ways of working.
Yeah, I love what you say there, because when you step back, which is what we try at AIMS to do with clients, is to say, well, what's the purpose here? What's the objective? What's the strategic objective? What challenge or what problem are we trying to address? Not what AI tool should I put in?
Exactly.
Not our competitor has just implemented this tool, and therefore we should also do it because it's saving them a lot of time, and they've been able to get rid of 5% of the workforce. So we should also be doing that. No, it's really an intentional step back. Look at the strategic objectives of the organization, what challenges there are to meeting those objectives, what current problems there are which are impacting return on investment, return on future, return on people, and then say, how do you design the organization and workflows with AI integrated into it? And then you'll find that humans have to be there. You can't do it without humans, because the human judgment element is what makes the difference. And new roles will be created, new opportunities. And that's about leaders being very intentional about giving opportunities to the workforce, because you've got great people working for you. You've got great managers leading your teams. Just give them the opportunity to shine in a new way. And we saw that with recently with a big global law firm, where one of their lawyers used AI to create a billing tool, and that's now been implemented across that global law firm. Well, that's a new way of thinking about a lawyer. That's a new skill set that a lawyer is using. So they just use the technology in a way that amplifies the good qualities that workers have. And help them along. Kim, this has been a really insightful conversation. Thank you so much for bringing out those points from the Gallup survey and connecting it with how leaders, managers need to be thinking now, particularly in the age of AI, and as we try to bring this technology into the workplace, be it Gen AI or agentic AI. And the reality is, in the future, we are going to be working alongside agents. And this is why one of the conversations I'm having with universities is actually helping graduates when they come out of university to already be conversant with agents and how to work with agents. What do you see the future of the workplace looking like?
So I think, as we've talked about, before, there's a lot of potential upside, and then there's a lot of challenges, right? That leaders and managers will face. And I think one of the biggest things that leaders can do is to be aware and cognizant of some of those challenges. For example, right, our workforce is really changing from a pyramid structure, right, to a diamond structure, right? And what that means is, we need to really think about how are we keeping and engaging young people in this environment, because if we don't, right, in 5-10 years time, we're going to have a leadership pipeline crisis, right? And that's not where we want to be. So one of the challenges is, how do we as organizations, right, help our young people adapt and move quickly, right? So that actually we are creating those skills that will be useful in the future. The other, I think, big challenge that organizations need to think about is, as we said, technology moves fast, but people and institutions don't move fast, right? So how do they consciously help people along the journey, right? And so that the transition period where there's going to be some skills gaps, where there's going to be some disruption, is not hurting their long-term viability as a company.
Wow. That is such a fantastic point, because in all of this, what we try to do is to help organizations maintain their competitive edge. But it's also about that sustainability, uplifting your workforce to ensure that you create a sustainable organization for long-term success, not just short-term, make this process more efficient.
Absolutely.
It has been an amazing conversation, Kim. I thank you so much for being here with us. I thank the audience for being here. The future of work could become more human more human-centric, because that if we are intentional about how we adopt AI, and that's a choice that leaders have to make. And that's what we encourage leaders to do at AIMS. So thank you again for taking the time to be here with us, Kim.
Thank you, Rob. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I do hope people take out of the discussion that you as leaders and managers can make a huge difference.
Thank you, audience, for taking time out of your day to listen to this podcast. And if you think this information, you found it interesting and insightful, please share it with someone who can benefit. There are many leaders out there who the conversation today can help them to think in a way that will help them adopt AI in a much more effective way. Follow the AIMS team for more insights like this, and have a good day.